Hey Pokedad fan club, it's me Pokedad, and today we're doing the set review for Rage of the Broken Sky. It finally released all the cards. This will be Breakpoint for us in the English speaking world, and we won't actually see these cards hit the English markets until February, I think February 10th or something like that. So anyway, though, but we're going to go ahead and go through them. Now, this set that I'm showing you is only 80 cards, but the set that we're going to be getting in English is going to be 120 cards. And so, therefore, we're going to have about 40 more cards. Some of those we know already, I think, like the Embor-EX and the Togekiss-EX, which were released in the in a set of their own in Japan several sets back. I don't know why they got them so early and we didn't. But anyway, those I think will be in this set, in our English set, that are not here because they've already been released in Japan. So, but we'll go through these ones that have been shown, and we may have a few more that we have to do when the English set comes out that I may go over. But for the most part, this is what we're going to get. Now, as you know, as I do most set reviews, I'm not going to talk about every single card. I'm just going to talk about the ones that appeal to me, I think are important. Maybe just fun cards to look at. So we've got this new one, and I'm not even sure how it's pronounced. Meganium, I think is how it's said, but I may be wrong. It's a stage 2, so it evolves from Chikorita and Bayleaf. And this one is not going to be like super competitive, but it's at least one that I thought I would show you. It's got 150 HP. Unfortunately, and I guess you could say that because it's a grass type, it could use Force of Giant Plants. So you could theoretically get one out on turn 1. The problem is a lot of these stage 2s and even the Chestnut Break, the attack costs are so expensive. I mean, if this was a grass and a DCE, it might be reasonable because then it's just 2 energy attachments. But now since it's grass, colorless, you're looking at 3 energy attachments just to get one of these charged up. It does only 50 damage, but then you get to heal from this Pokemon the amount of damage the attack did. So you would heal 50 damage every turn, which is kind of cool. And it's also got the ability Overgrowth, that when the remaining HP on this Pokemon is 50 or less, then this Pokemon's attacks do 70 more damage, which means that you would do 120 damage and you would heal 120 damage, which would pretty much bring you back down to bring you up to full health again. Unless you're just had like 10 left or something like that. But is it going to see play competitively? I don't think so. Matter of fact, I can pretty much guarantee it won't see play competitively. It's just, even though it's beefy, 150 HP in a one-hit KO meta right now. I mean, when you have Raichu who can Circle Circuit and Night March who's just killing in one turn, and throw in Vespiquen and Mega Rayquaza and all these other ones, this just isn't gonna quite make it. Now, C-Dot is the pre-evolution of Shiftry and Nuzleaf. We'll get to those later, but those are dark types, so we'll look at those later. I've already talked a little bit about them, but we'll revisit them. Alright, we got Kricketot and Kricketune. Actually, this is surprising. I don't really want to talk about the Kricketune much. I actually want to look at the Kricketot, because Kricketot has this attack. Now, it's only 60 HP, so it's probably going to get knocked out. But for grass-type decks, this could be really good. For 1 grass, Bug Sense, search your deck for 3 grass Pokemon and then show them to your opponent. If you've got the Forest of Giant Plants, you literally could grab, a basic stage 1, stage 2, and then next turn put them down. I mean, Vileplume, I'm thinking, potentially could be used with this card, making sure that you have a turn 2 Vileplume. So that's possible. And then also Chestnut Break. I mean, it's already hard to get all those pieces together anyway. So for this to be able to grab the Chespin, or even if you could get like a Bridge It Out on turn 1, use this attack, and then grab like Quilladin, Chestnut, and Chestnut Break, and then evolve right away. I mean, that's pretty powerful, I think. Anyway, moving right along, I don't know if it'll see competitive play. Probably not. But I do think it's something that's worth play testing to see how it would work. The thing you got to realize, though, is if you use this attack, you're going to be sacrificing Kricketot anyway. So that's just how it is. Petalil and Lilligant, nothing really major here, I don't think. 20 damage and during your opponent's next turn, if he or she attaches an energy card to the defending Pokemon from his or her hand, then the defending Pokemon becomes asleep. I guess that could be kind of disruptive, but for only 20 damage, it's not like you're going to really be doing a lot. And furthermore, if they have something on the bench, they can just put the energy on the bench and then retreat or switch into the bench Pokemon. So I don't know if that's going to really be anything. This Durant seems nice. Durant's always been kind of like one of those mill type decks. In the past, there was the metal one, and for every Durant you had in in play, you could mill a card from your opponent's bench. So you literally could mill 4 cards if all 4 of them were in play at one time. This one's a little bit different. Excuse me, guys. I'm a little tired. This is late at night. This one has Grind Down, and if this Pokemon has any damage counters on it, you discard the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck. So if you can use this, could be work with like is it Team Magma's Secret Base? So when you play this down, it's going to have damage counters on it. And then for a Grass and a Colorless, which is 2 attachments, you could be milling 4 cards every turn. The only question is can it be streamed very well? It might be with Bronzong. You could possibly put this with Bronzong, so that Bronzong would supply a metal every turn, and then you could just attach a Grass. And then you could stream Durant's. Again, they're only going to have 70 HP, but to be able to knock 4 cards off the top of your opponent's deck seems pretty good to me. Alright, moving right along. So now we've got Numel and Camerupt. This Camerupt is kind of interesting, but I still don't think it's going to be all that competitive. 130 HP, which is quite a bit of HP for a Stage 1. For a 2 fire and a colorless, Eruption does 80 damage, and then each player discards the top card of his or her deck, and the attack does 60 more damage for each energy card discarded in this way. So you might be able to use like a Trick Shovel and see what's going to be on the top of your deck or on the top of your opponent's deck. And if it's an energy, keep it there. If not, you'll have a shot. And that could potentially knock out EXs, but I don't think it's going to be played much. Heatmore is a basic with 100 HP. Fortified Flame, 20 damage, and if this Pokemon has a Pokemon tool attached, this attack does 20 more. So I guess technically you could have a Muscle Band on him, and it would do 60 damage for 1 fire, which is nothing to write home about. We looked at Slowbro a little bit already and Slowking, but for those of you that may have not seen my other videos, we'll review these a little bit. The thing from Slowbro that I think a lot of people are at least intrigued about is this 3 colorless Miracle Home Run. When you use this attack, if you have 1 prize card remaining, you win the game. So basically, you don't even have to knock out your final opponent, your opponent's final Pokemon. If you just have 1 prize card left, you can just use the Miracle Home Run and win the game. So that could be neat, but I'm not so I don't know. Slowking, psych up 40 damage, and during the next turn it does 40 more, so it'd be, could potentially do 80 damage. But the big thing about this one is King's Inspiration, and this is a stage 2. Or is it? I'm sorry, no, it's a stage 1. I'm sorry, for some reason, no, it's a stage 1 also. They both come from Slowpoke. I apologize. I'm not. For some reason, I thought these were an evolution, but no, it has 100 HP. This ability, though, is pretty interesting. Once during your turn, before you attack, you may flip a coin. If heads, choose an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon and move it. Excuse me, guys. Move it to one of his or her bench Pokemon. So again, this could be very disruptive because you could take Double Dragon energy and put it onto something that can't use it, Double Dragon, it would get discarded. Or you can keep just throwing stuff on Hoopa, continually putting energy on Hoopa. So it could see play, and if you had more than one of them out, I mean, you could literally be doing more than one energy per turn. So a lot of these didn't really meet much cut. Shelter, nothing special. Cloister, Sudden Clamp, 10 damage. If this Pokemon evolved from Shelter during his turn, the opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. That could be interesting, but it only does 10 damage. And I guess if you could somehow play like Super Scoop Up or AZ over and over, you could constantly paralyze them over and over, because you could pull it up, put another one down. I don't know if that's even worth trying. I mean, for only 10 damage, you could put a Muscle Band on it, make it 30 damage, but anyway. Alright, looking at our first EXs here. Gyarados-EX and Mega Gyarados. Alright, so Gyarados-EX, Wet Weather, flip a coin until you get tails, and for each head, search your deck for a water energy card and attach it to this Pokemon, and then shuffle your deck afterwards. Okay, I don't like these kind of attacks. I've talked about this before, but I'm a math major, my degree's in mathematics, and Wet Weather, just you're 50% of the time you're not gonna get anything from the attack. And 70% of the time, 75% of the time, you're going to get one card, one water energy, or less. So you could get 0 or 1, 75% of the time. The other 25% of the time that you get lucky, you'll get 2 or more. I mean, and your odds continue to go down more and more. To get like 3 or 4 is just, 1 or 2 or 5% chance or something like that. So Wet Weather isn't really all that good as an energy acceleration. Splash Bang for 2 water and a double colorless does 130 damage and then does 10 damage to each of your bench Pokemon. This is very similar to Tyranitar-EX, which came out a couple sets ago and had that same attack for 2 darkness and a double colorless, 130 damage. Does 10 damage to your bench, and it's very underwhelming. So let's hope the Mega can help us here. Alright, Mega Gyarados for 4 colorless, so it's all colorless, which means I guess technically you could kind of throw it into any kind of deck, or you could do 2 DCEs. Okay, you're going to do 120 damage, and then you may have this attack do 20 more damage times the number of water energy attached to this Pokemon. If you do decide to do the extra damage, discard the top 2 cards from your deck. Okay, so let's say you got 2 water and a double colorless. Now instead of it doing 120, it now does 160, which is decent, I guess, but it's still 4 energies needed, which we've already talked about. I mean, we've seen in the past Megas that do real well are like the 2 energy drop Megas. Mega Manectric, that's a really solid Mega. It only does 110 damage, but it 2-shots almost everything. But with free retreat and all that, it's just really great. Whereas Mega Ampharos, Mega Tyranitar, we've seen these 4 energy attacks, and they just don't do that well. Now we are going to have a little bit of energy acceleration, which we'll talk about toward the end of this video in our items, that might make Mega Gyarados more effective. And I do believe that there's also an EX that can, that the Japanese already have, but I don't think we've gotten yet. And if it does come out in the next set, then that EX could potentially be used to help accelerate energy. It's a water type EX. And so that might work too. But as far as this goes, I'm not so sure. It's going to need a lot of help. I mean, if you had 4 water energies on there, it would do 200 damage. And you'd still have to discard the top 2 cards of your deck. So that would be worth it. I mean, 200 damage is pretty strong. You're knocking out just about everything. Obviously, an expanded Archie's Blastoise could make this really, really strong. So that could be cool. And also, one other thing to remember is, since it is a water type, it could use Archie's Ace in the Hole, so you could just forego the Gyarados evolution altogether, which could allow for some potential, you know, you could see this in another type of deck. Like, I could see it in maybe a Fairy Toolbox deck, possibly, or something like that. Since it only requires 4 energies, you could Archie's it in. So that's possible. This card, this Suicune, I don't know that I get. I kind of do, but I don't think it's really going to be all that special. The ability is Wind Protection. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, prevent all effects of your opponent's attacks, except for damage done to each of your Pokemon. This ability does not remove existing effects. So basically, it's going to keep poison and sleep and confusion away from an opponent's attack. And it would also prevent your opponent's attack. Like, sometimes it says switch the active with the bench. Since it doesn't affect even the bench, you couldn't do that. That wouldn't work either. So I'm not really sure, other than that, how it helps. And it's a 3 water cost with 110 damage. The Suicune with the Safeguard ability that was in, back in the Plasmas, Black and White era, was, I think, a lot better. I don't think this one's going to see much play. Alright, Manaphy EX. This one's kind of interesting. The first thing is it has the ability Aqua Cube. So for each of your Pokemon that has any water energy attached to it has no retreat cost. This is going to be kind of like Darkrai-EX. It's going to kind of replace Darkrai, the old version. We're actually getting a new version in this set. But it's a lower HP, so it's only 120 HP, and it can get knocked out a little bit easier. The good thing is it's still, just like Darkrai, it worked with Fairy Toolbox decks. This can now work in standard with Fairy Toolbox decks. Use Aromatisse, use Rainbow Energy, and then you can transfer that Rainbow Energy to any of your Pokemon and give it free retreat, because the Rainbow Energy would act as water energy, but also could act as fairy energy, so that's why you could transfer it around. So Manaphy EX could be used in a Fairy Toolbox deck, and in fact, I feel like the way they've given Big Basics so much support in this set, which we'll talk about, I feel like the Fairy Toolbox is going to be a big play competitively in the near future. Alright, the attack to this Manaphy isn't terrible. It's not great, but it's not terrible. 2 water energies, and it does 60 damage. And then you heal 30 HP from each of your benched Pokemon. If you're using that, though, you're really putting yourself at risk, because this is only 120 HP, and it's probably going to get knocked out as an EX. And 2 water energy attachments just to be able to use that, I don't know. Anyway, but for the ability, that alone, it will see play because of that. We got Temple, we got Palpitoad, and then we got Seismitoad. Seismitoad is really the only one worth talking about, and it's really not great. Seismitoad-EX is the Seismitoad to go with. This one, 150 150 HP. Remember, you can Archees it in, so it could be used for that. Sop up 1 water energy, choose up to 3 energy cards from your discard pile and attach them to this Pokemon. So you could get it charged up for next turn if you can survive. And then in Rumblefall does 90 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused, and your opponent can't retreat next turn. So in a way, that's kind of cool, because if you confuse them and hit them for 90 damage and they can't retreat, then they either have to choose not to attack you, or they have to choose to try to attack through the confusion. And if they hurt them, if they aren't successful, they'll hurt themselves and could potentially even knock themselves out. And 90 damage is a pretty interesting number, because against EXs, that's a 2-hit KO. But 4 energies for 90 damage, even with these special effects, seems like a really, really high cost. And I mean, if you do use Sop Up, that's 1 attack, 2 attacks, 3 attacks you're going to have to use just to knock out an EX. And in this with the speed of the game right now, competitively, this just isn't going to cut it. Ducklet is no big deal. This Swanna is at least interesting. Okay, I don't know that it's going to be great, but it's going to be interesting because it's a water type that has only colorless attacks. So again, it can be splashable into other decks, like the Magnezone deck right now with lightning types. This could synergize real well, because you could put 3 lightnings on here. And if something is weak to water, which not much is right now, but if for some reason fire became a thing, this could help against that. What does it do? It's just Brave Bird. It does 80 damage, but then it does 20 damage to itself. And it's only an 80 HP Pokemon, so as intriguing as it is, I just don't think it's going to see competitive play. Again, because we don't really hit it. Water right now doesn't. I mean, fire is the only thing that's weak to water, and fire really isn't all that prevalent right now. So, all right, now we're coming into a big one. This one I really like. I know several of my friends have been talking about this because Greninja looks pretty strong here. We're going to kind of skip over the Froakie, and normally I would skip even over the Frogadier, but this Frogadier is actually pretty interesting. There's the picture of it. 70 HP. It doesn't actually attack. That's what's so weird. Its only attack is search your deck for up to 3 Frogadier and put them on your bench. Now, this is really cool. As you can see, we're going to get down here to Greninja Break in just a moment. But here we got Frogadier, and the biggest problem with break cards is how do you get to the evolution? We've already seen this issue with Chestnut Break and Florges Break, because those are stage 2 Pokemon with break cards, so in essence they're stage 3s. And right now they're not seeing any play competitively, and really they're not even seeing a lot of play casually. I have made a Florges Break deck, and it's kind of fun, and it can be useful, but it's just not really viable to get it all out in time. But they at least made this one somewhat viable, I think, and they built it in. I wish they would have built a supporter to help breaks, but they didn't. So they built it into the Frogadier, which allows him to attack and grab 3 more Frogadier and put them on your bench. So this can be cool, because then if this Frogadier survives, you technically could have 3 or 4 Greninjas ready to go for the next turn. Alright, and Greninja then is when it starts getting interesting, because Greninja goes up to 130 HP, which is really solid for a stage 2. Decent. Better than others. I guess I should say it's pretty average for a stage 2. But for a colorless, alright, it does Shadow Slip, And it doesn't show it here, but you can see on the card it actually does 40 damage. And until the end of your opponent's next turn, each Pokemon he or she has in play in his or her hand and in his or her discard pile has no abilities, including Pokemon newly brought in to play. So this is kind of like a Hex Maniac. You can hit them for 40 and then Hex Maniac them also, and still you could have done a supporter for your turn, which is kind of cool because you can stop Shamans from being used. You can stop Bats from being used for a turn. You can stop Bronzong from Metal Lynxing for a turn. And these are all critical abilities that are needed in decks, and Greninja can pretty much stop them. Now you're only going to hit for 40, but hey, you're getting something along with that 40, and it's for just a colorless. So, though if you're playing Greninja, you're probably going to be using water energy anyway, so I don't know the fact that it's a colorless makes much of a difference. He also has another attack, Gecko Slash, 60 damage, and you can choose one water energy attached to this Pokemon and return it to your hand. If you do, this attack does 20 more damage, so it would hit for 80. Now, I don't know why you wouldn't do that, why you wouldn't move it back to your hand, because then next turn you can either reattach it or you can use it with Greninja Break. Okay. Now, before I go into Greninja Break, there is something that I need to remind you about. By the way, this is what the Greninja looks like. There was another Greninja from XY base set, and that one might actually play better than this one, even though I think this one's pretty cool in its own right. It has its own specialties. Matter of fact, you could even see like a mixture of the two, maybe two of each. But the other one from XY base set had an ability very similar to this break card. It was called Water Shuriken. You discard a water energy in your hand, and then you hit any of your opponent's Pokemon, even their bench, with 3 damage counters, or the equivalent of 30 damage. And if you had multiple ones in play, you could use that multiple times. So that one could be used. It also had an attack, and I don't remember what it was, but I think it was for 1 energy it hit for 50. So it wasn't a terrible attack either. Though this one looks like it, being able to hit for 80 for 1 energy seems pretty solid for me. That's like a Miltank with a powerful friends with the stage 2 in play. Alright, so let's move into the Greninja Break. So if you were to use the other Greninja with the ability Water Shuriken, if you had 2 water energies in your hand, you could use that ability and then this ability, so you could actually double up on their ability. So you could use Water Shuriken, hit your opponent for 3 damage counters, and then you could also use Giant Water Shuriken. Okay, and that's what the ability added to this Greninja Break. Remember, when you break evolve, you get to retain all the attacks and abilities of the previous evolution, but you get a higher HP. So in this case, we're up to 170, and then you get this added ability, which is the Giant Water Shuriken. Once during your turn, before you attack, if this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, you may discard a water energy from your hand and then put 6 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So you could use the regular Water Shuriken, and then you could use the Giant Water Shuriken and put 9 damage counters on the field. Then you could retreat this Pokemon, bring up another break, and again use Water Shuriken and Giant Water Shuriken once again, and you could hit 180 damage and then still be able to attack for like 50 if you wanted to. So theoretically, you could put like 230 damage on the field per turn. Now, the one thing that is going to be important to remember, though, is you have to have all that water energy in your hand. So this would mean that you would need to probably play Fisherman just so you could bring all the water energy back to your hand. But because Fisherman is in play, that makes this Greninja Break even stronger, because you can constantly be reusing these abilities, and you can be sniping stuff on the bench that has low HP, like Shamans and maybe Pokemon that haven't evolved yet, you can knock them out before they start evolving. So Greninja Break, I'm not 100% sure. It's definitely going to need play testing, but I think it could be very, very useful. All right, Blitzel and Zebstrika. Not really going to go over Blitzel, but Zebstrika is a lightning type, 100 HP. The one cool thing about it is its attack is for just a double colorless, and so anyway, it's Takedown Bolt, 50 plus damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon has fighting resistance, this attack does 60 more damage. Okay, so this is going to be what I call, for lack of a better word, I guess you could call it an Eviltal killer, or you could just call it a flying type killer in general, because most flying types are weak to lightning, but they're resistant to fighting. And so what's going to end up happening is it's going to hit for only 50 damage, but against these types, it's actually going to do 110 damage. And when you have when you hit for 110 damage, and you're hitting for weakness, because most of these flying types are weak to lightning, you're now hitting for 220. So Zebstrika takes out Eviltal-EX for just a double colorless. It could, and it's kind of splashable too. I mean, because there's a lot of decks that just run a double colorless. So this could be very useful against Eviltal decks, and Eviltal decks are pretty strong right now and pretty popular. So I could see this being played as a tech. Now the ability also kind of helps as long as this Pokemon is in play. Damage from your lightning type Pokemon attacks isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. This is really, really strong, okay? Raichu, one of the biggest problems Raichu has was Aegislash. Now we have Hex Maniac, so that kind of has caused wall type Pokemon to be used a little bit less. But one of the issues with Raichu was if you're playing double colorless, Raichu couldn't attack through Aegislash. So you either had to take 2 turns to charge up Raichu for a Circle Circuit, or you had to figure a way to get around Aegislash. Zebstrika now allows you to do that with all your lightning type Pokemon. So now your Circle Circuit Raichu is going to just be able to go right through Aegislash. And to me, that seems like, wow, that's pretty good. It's kind of like Shred that Hydreigon has, or we'll look at Espeon in a minute, where whatever's on the Pokemon, whether it's an Assault Vest or a Hard Charm or an ability, you're going to act as if it isn't even there when you attack with your lightning type Pokemon. So is Zebstrika going to see play? Absolutely. Will it be a main attacker? No, but it'll definitely be a supporting card, and you could see it being used in any decks that use double colorless. You could even see this in an Eviltal deck for the mirror match. You could see this in, again, any deck that just uses mostly double colorless, possibly even a Seismitoad deck, maybe. I don't know. But anything that would use double colorless, this Zebstrika could be used. Alright, we got Drowsy and Hypno. The one thing about this Hypno is a lot of people have been saying this artwork is kind of creepy. And poor little Clefairy here, Clefable, I can't remember which one it is. I think it's Clefairy. He's causing him to go from a happy zone to the nightmare zone because of his hypnotism, I guess you could say. Hypno, I do think this is also going to be a playable card. Goodnight Baby is the ability. Once during your turn, you may use the ability, and both players' active Pokemon are now asleep. Now, there's a lot of ways to get around this. I mean, if you've got a free retreat, well, I guess you couldn't, not a free retreater, that wouldn't work. But you could play Sparkling Robe, or you could play something that could prevent the damage, the effect being done to you, and still keep your opponent asleep. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, we'll talk about that in a moment when we get to Darkrai-EX. But being able to put your opponent to sleep every single turn is not always a bad thing, you know. The only thing is you would have to find a way. Well, actually, the best way is just to use Zoroark or Keldeo, depending on if you're in standard or expanded, and rush in and retreat. So you could use it on, you know, put your guy to sleep, then rush in and retreat, and then bring that person back up and use them for an attack. So pretty cool, I think. I think we'll see some play. Zen Headbutt. You're not gonna probably attack with him, but this will combo with the new Darkrai-EX, which we'll look at in just a moment. All right, Espeon EX. I'm affectionately calling this Swiss Army Knife EX. It only has two things that it does, but I think those two things are going to be in. Will this ever see a deck of its own? No. I don't think you're going to see someone say, hey, I'm going to play an Espeon EX deck. However, I do think that this is going to be added to a lot of EX decks, and it's going to just really make big basic EXs even stronger. Alright, so let's talk about why. Alright, the first thing is, for a colorless, we've got Miracle Shine here. Devolve each of your opponent's evolved Pokemon and put the highest stage evolution card into the opponent's hand. Alright, so this isn't going to be really helpful against stage 1 decks or decks that are using basics. Where it's going to really come in and shine is against mega decks. Okay, so here's what you do: you get rid of all their Spirit Links, either through Startling Megaphone or Xerosic, and then, and particularly if you can Head Ringer the megas before they evolve, that would even be better. Then when they do spend a turn to evolve it, you just use Espeon to bring them back to their hand. The problem is they'll never ever be able to evolve back into the Mega. If they try to, what's going to end up happening is they're going to end their turn immediately, and then you'll just Miracle Shine them again and bring them back down to their normal. And most people that are playing Mega decks are relying on the Mega to win. I mean, most people, there's a lot of non-Mega deck. I'll give you an example. If you were going to try to win with Ampharos EX instead of Mega Ampharos, you'd have a hard time doing that. If you were going to try to win with Tyranitar instead of Mega Tyranitar, you'd have a hard time doing that. Even Mega Mewtwo, if I was trying to win with Shatter Shot and Damage Change instead of Psychic Infinity or Vanishing Strike, I'm going to have a hard time winning with just a regular Mewtwo EX, at least the new ones. Now, if we're playing with the old ones, it might still be viable, but so Espeon is basically going to knock they're going to have to change their whole strategy, and it's probably not going to be an optimal strategy for them, giving them a great chance to win, which that alone will give you a wonderful chance to put the odds in your favor against mega decks. Alright, the other thing is Psycho Shock. It does 70 damage, and this damage isn't affected by any effects on the defending Pokemon. This is just like the Zebstrika, which I just talked to you about, where it can go through walls like Aegislash and Pyroar and Beautifly and Regice. All those menacing Pokemon that, try to keep you from hurting them. It can go through those. So now you don't have to worry about Regice. If Regice hits you with a Resistance Blizzard, bring up your Espeon and hit him back. Espeon EX will go through Regice now. So Espeon helps you in two ways. It's going to help you against the Mega decks, but it's also going to help you against the other decks that don't the other non-EX decks too. So, or the wall decks. So Espeon, very, very good. I think it's going to be used in a lot of big basics. And if I haven't already said this, I really think Fairy Toolbox will be back because there's just so much great stuff for basic Pokemon, EXs especially, in this set. Alright, this Drapion, I'm not even going to really waste your time with it. It's probably going to be seen in the theme deck is what I expect. And some little kid will get that and think, wow, that's a really cool card. But it's not. This Sigilyph, again, I think the Safeguard Sigilyph that's in Expanded right now is better. Reflect Shield during your opponent's next turn. If this Pokemon takes any damage from an attack, then put 5 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. I don't get it. I mean, yeah, you're gonna hit them back, but you're not doing any. You're basically what you're saying is I'm not gonna hit you this turn, but if you hit me, I'll hit you for 5 damage counters. Well, that's great, but 50 damage counters really isn't. 50 damage isn't all that much. It's not gonna really hurt most things. I mean, even if I was hitting with like a Raichu, I mean, if you don't knock out my Raichu, then I'm happy about that. You know, I get 2 attacks with my Raichu. That's awesome. And then Psychic Report, 30 damage, and your opponent reveals his or her hand. Wow, that's great. So this Sigilyph, sorry, it's not going to make the cut. All right, what is going to make the cut, and we can say welcome back, is Garbodor. All right, now this is it's not a reprint. It's actually a brand new Garbodor, but it has the same ability as the old one, Garbotoxin. And I think it's going to be used in some decks. If this Pokemon has a Pokemon Tool card attached to it, every Pokemon in play, in each player's hands, and each player's discard pile, has no abilities. Now the question is, do you Wally for it, turn 1, attach a tool card, and then lock people from being able to play Shamans? Or actually, you know what's even better? And see, here's the thing. Matter of fact, I could see this being played in like Night March. Okay, I know this sounds weird, but Night March has so much draw power, and it's through item-based draw mostly. I mean, there are supporter draw, but it's mostly through Shamans and items, right? So, you know, they can draw through 30, 40 cards in their deck on turn 1. So the chances of hitting the Wally are going to be pretty good. They hit the Wally, go to Garbodor, attach a Float Stone, and then guess what? Your opponent, when it's their turn, doesn't get to use their Shamans. And you're all set up. I mean, so this is going to make Night March strong. It certainly will be used in other decks, especially if you can turn 1 Wally and then get a Float Stone on it all in one turn. Garbodor is going to be quite interesting now that he's back again in Standard. One other thing is, I do actually kind of like the attack. The other attack was like Sludge Bomb or something like that. This one's called Panic Bomb, and the other one was like 2 Psychic and a Colorless, so it didn't really make sense to see Garbodor being played. But with Dimension Valley, this one could see play because with Dimension Valley it would only be a 2 energy attachment, a Psychic, and a double Colorless. That's 60 damage, and then the Pokemon is poisoned and confused. Now, granted, am I going to build a deck around Garbodor? Probably not. But the fact that I could potentially use him as an attacker if I needed it, that's not bad, and I like that possibility. All right, let's move right along. So Honedge, Doublade, and Aegislash actually got a Psychic typing this time, not the Steel that they normally get. You know, Aegislash is a like Ghost type, so he's actually weak to Darkness in this set. He's 140 HP, He's got an interesting attack here. Sword Pain, again with Dimension Value, would reduce down to just a double colorless instead of the 3 colorless here. Place damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon equal to the number of damage counters already on them. It sounds kind of intriguing to me because if you could, this could kind of work with Mega Gallade or Bats. I mean, this is probably going to go with Bats or Fortress or something that can hit the bench. So, I mean, it seems intriguing. I just don't know if it's going to be super effective. I mean, you already have to have damage counters on them for it to actually do anything. So maybe you could see something like Fortress where it does 1 damage counter to everything. Then you could use the Bronzong from Breakthrough, which does 3 damage counters to everything that already has a damage counter on it. So now you have 4 on everything. Then you could use Aegislash and then double that to 8 and then finish it all off with a Meowstic that then moves all the damage counters around. I don't know. That seems quite unfeasible to me, but it is still intriguing, and maybe with the right type of deck, it could see play. Alright, Skrelp has a dragon, evolves into a dragon type, so we'll look at that in just a moment. Alright, the next Pokemon we're going to look at is Phantom, Trevenant, and Trevenant Break. And here's another break card that I think is really good. I like it. I like the potential of it. I like how it synergizes with its stage 1. But just like the Greninja break that we looked at, this also has another option for its stage 1. It has the XY base set Trevenant. And so we need to talk about both of them and the potential of how these could all work together. Again, this might be something where you run a 2-2 split of this Trevenant. Alright, so the base XY base set, if you're not familiar with, it does like Tree Slam is the attack, and it's for 1 psychic and 2 colorless. It does 60 damage and then 20 to 2 of the bench Pokemon. It also has the ability, which is the key thing, and I forget what the name of the ability is, but basically it item locks your opponent. So a lot of people try to use a Wally to item lock their opponent turn 1 before they even get a chance to play items. And they use that Trevenant. And then you could evolve into the Trevenant Break that way and use this Break card. Alright, before we look at the Break card though, let's look at this Trevenant because it does something totally different, and I think it's going to see a fair amount of play competitively, especially since I feel like big basics are going to be on the rise because of this set. So Trevenant, this Trevenant, and I guess I'll show you a close-up. Kind of looks like he's doing a little jig or a dance there. If this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent's basic Pokemon's attacks cost 1 colorless more. So basically, he head ringers every single basic Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field. So Night March, this is going to be a pretty strong card against Night March. Because now, guess what? Those Joltics have to attack for 3, and the Pumpkaboos have to attack with 4 energies. And even with Dimension Valley, you're still going to have to use 2 attachments to be able to attack with your Night Marchers. So this card alone will be used against Night March, which is going to be outstanding. But think about the implications. Seismitoad now has to attack with 3 colorless energy to get a Quaking Punch off. Giratina now has to have 5 energies to be able to attack. If you played Head Ringers with this deck, I mean, this could be a very disruptive deck to your opponent, just because they're going to have a hard time being able to even attack. So anyway, that's Trevenant, the new Trevenant. We'll look at its attack too. Energy Press is for a Psychic and double colorless, just like the other one, which does Tree Slam. It does 70 damage, but this attack does 10 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon, which is kind of cool because since your opponent's going to have to attach more energy because of the ability, then it makes sense that the attack synergizes with how much energy is on the opponent's Pokemon. So if they have 2 or 3, it's now going to do 90 to 100 damage, which kind of puts it in that 2-shot potential range. Excuse me. Alright, so going right along now, let's look at the Trevenant Break, which again could be used in either of the XY base set one or this one. It increases the HP to 160, which is awesome. It gets a 50 HP boost. And then it has an additional attack for a Psychic and a colorless. But please remember that with Dimension Valley in play, it would be just a Psychic. And here's what it does. Silent Fear. Place 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. So maybe this is the card that Aegislash could work with. I don't know if that really pairs well, because now you're looking at a 2 stage 2s in essence. But place 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. And one thing I should point out here is it does not say do 30 damage to each of them. It says place 3 damage counters. So that means it gets past Mr. Mime's shield ability. It means that anything like hard charms or stuff that would kind of lessen the damage, it will still hit for 3 damage counters regardless. It's like having a crow. It's like being able to Crobat every single one of your opponent's Pokemon. And again, against Night March, this is going to be really, really strong because now you can KO any Joltix that are out there in one shot, and 2 attacks is going to knock out any Pumpkaboos on there. And I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty cool. I think this break is going to see some play. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. I think Trevenant Break is going to be a fun one to try out and to play test. All right, let's move right along. We're at 52 minutes, and I know most of these take me a good while, good hour or so to get through, but I want to be kind of thorough with the cards. So, but I'm going to kind of speed it up a little bit. Sudowoodo. This could be kind of interesting. It does require 2 energy drops of fighting and a colorless, but it has the attack Let's Imitate. So if your opponent used a Pokemon's attack during his or her last turn, use that attack as this attack. It's kind of cool because you could kind of keep him on the bench and get him ready, and then when they do some powerful attack, like could you imagine someone getting Dragon Ascented and this guy come back and hit Dragon Ascent for 300? Or Turbo Volt or something like that. I think it's kind of neat to be able to use that same attack over as the opponent did last turn. 90 HP, basic type. The only downside I think is that it is a 2 energy attachment, so that could be a problem. Alright, we'll move into Gible, Gabite, and Garchomp. Garchomp is normally a dragon type, but they made him a fighting type, which allows for Maxie's Hidden Ball trick. So you can get this into play without needing to evolve using Maxie's. And we saw Gallade in the last set. It's being used a lot with Maxie's Hidden Ball trick. This card also, I think, will see some play with Maxie's Hidden Ball trick. You see a Soul Turbo here does 60 damage. But since he's a fighting type, we could slap a strong energy on there and a muscle band. And now for 1 energy, it hits 100 damage. And then you choose 1 energy card in your discard pile and attach it to one of your Pokemon. Here's the thing though, this isn't just a basic energy. It says choose 1 energy card from your discard pile. So you got a double colorless in your discard pile. That's okay. We'll move it over to whatever you need it to. And the other thing it says, it doesn't say to your bench Pokemon, it says to one of your Pokemon. So you could literally put another fighting energy or another even strong energy that's in the discard pile back on Garchomp so that next turn he can do his second attack. And his second attack is Biting Pledge. 80 plus damage if your opponent's active Pokemon is an EX. This attack does 80 more damage. So now you're hitting for 160. 2 strong energies would be 200, or even just 1 strong energy would be 180, knocking out most EXs. So Garchomp could be used. I think you're going to see this card see play competitively. Alright, Pancham, we'll look at Pangoro in just a moment in the dark types. Alright, we talked about C-Dot earlier. Now we've got Nuzleaf, which is nothing special, but it's the evolution into Shiftry. One thing I should point out is that Shiftry could, technically, you could get it out on turn 1 with the Forest of Giant Plants, because there is another version of Nuzleaf, I think, from Flashfire, that is a grass type, and so you could use that one instead of this dark type. And with C-Dot being a grass type and the Nuzleaf being a grass type, you could use Forest of Giant Plants, because Forest of Giant Plants is based on the pre-evolution, not what they're evolving into. So since the two pre-evolutions would both be grass types, you could get all the way to Shiftry on turn 1. Now Shiftry, there is a grass Shiftry, but this is a dark Shiftry. It has 140 HP, and it has two attacks. And I don't know. It is a stage 2, so it's one of those that's, I think, going to be borderline playable. But I could actually see this being used as a very disruptive, maybe even used in a mill type deck. All right, let's look at what it does. Blow away. For a darkness and a colorless, flip 3 coins. If any are heads, look at your opponent's hand. Then discard a number of cards from your opponent's hand equal to the number of heads. That's going to be kind of cool, especially when we look at some of the supporters. One of the supporters is Delinquent, which can knock 3 cards out of your opponent's hand. And then if you could use this Shiftry to knock even more cards out of your hand, you may knock all the cards out of your opponent's hand and then just put them in top deck mode from that point on. So that could be useful. And then for a darkness and a double colorless, you've got Tengu Return, does 60 damage, but then choose 1 trader card in your discard pile, show it to your opponent, and put it into your hand. So this is where it might be you could use like a Trick Shovel and just keep milling your opponent every turn, or you can use Crushing Hammers so that you're constantly taking energy off, or a VS Seeker so that it allows you to grab that supporter that constantly takes cards out of your opponent's hand, which is called Delinquent. I don't know, there's a lot of things that this card could do and potentially be pretty strong. So I think the Shiftry you could see it in a very disruptive troll deck, and possibly a mill deck. Even though it does hit for 60 damage, I think it'll be more in like a mill type deck. Alright, I talked about Darkrai-EX a couple times already. Let's look at this Pokemon here. 180 HP, it's weak to fighting and resistant to psychic like the previous Darkrai. Doesn't have an ability, it just has 2 attacks this time. Dark Pulse does 20 damage for a double colorless, and does 20 more damage for each darkness energy attached to all your Pokemon. That could still be playable, because if you're playing like Yveltal with this, you could have 4 or 5 darkness energies in play possibly. And let's say you had 4, you could attach a double colorless to this and do 100 damage, which is not bad at all. It's a 2-hit KO potential. And you may need to do that just so that you begin charging it up. Turn 1, get the double colorless so it can do Dark Pulse. Then turn 2, add the darkness energy, and use Dark Head. Now this is where I was talking about where Hypno or Malamar will come into play, because it does 80 plus damage, And if your opponent's active Pokemon is asleep, this attack does 80 more damage. So now we're doing 160 damage. Slap on a Muscle Band, or better yet, slap on Reverse Valley for the Stadium, which we'll look at in just a little bit, and it'll do an extra 10 damage. Now you're doing 170. Or you could even add Fighting Spirit Belt, which we'll also talk about in just a moment. Hit that crucial number of 180. Alright, Pangoro, I don't really think anything special about him. 10 damage. Switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon's attacks do 60 less. Okay, great. Alright, Scizor-EX and Mega Scizor-EX. Now, I think this Mega is going to see play. Some people said they're skeptical about it. I think it's going to see some play. Again, we talk about the Megas that have done well are the ones that don't require a lot of energy attachments. Mega Manectric was one of the big ones. Mega Mewtwo Y with the Psychic Infinity is doing pretty well too. We're seeing that in making it to the top tables at competitive play. And it only requires a double colorless, so it's pretty easy to get going. I mean, one energy attachment and it's attacking. Mega Scizor has a 2 metal attack, which means you're going to have to use 2 attachments, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's look at Scizor-EX first. Here's what it looks like. 170 HP metal type, weak to fire and resistant to psychic, but the weak to fire isn't a big issue because there's not a lot of fire decks out there right now. Not that are competitive, let's put it that way. Alright, for 1 metal energy we do Still Wing, does 20 damage, and during your opponent's next turn this Pokemon takes 20 less damage from your attacks. So it's kind of cool. 20 damage, and then reduce the amount of damage by 20. It's okay. 2 metals got Gale Thrust, 50 damage, and if this Pokemon was on your bench and became your active Pokemon this turn, this attack does 60 more damage, which that wouldn't be very hard to deal with, to have that happen with a stand-in, or Keldeo with Russian Retreat, Zoroark with stand-in. You could always make sure that he's coming from the bench every single turn. So Gale Thrust could do 110 damage every turn, and it's just for 2 metal energies. So not too bad. I don't think he's going to play just as Scizor-EX himself. I don't think he has what it takes. Though he would pretty much 2-hit KO just about everything in the format. So let's look at that Mega Scizor now. I already showed you the picture. Sorry guys about the yawning. Iron Crusher here. I do like how that comes in like that. Just really the way the words are added into kind of his attack. Just really neat. Of course, we'll get, when it comes out in English, we'll get that all in Japanese. So, all right. So Iron Crusher, 2 metal energies. One thing to note is he is 220 HP, has 120, does 120 damage, and you may either discard a special energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon, active Pokemon, which is cool because then you can hit Seismitoad and knock out that energy, or you can hit Giratina. I don't know that you would do damage to it. No, you would need to play a Hex Maniac to hit Giratina, but then you would do 120 damage and you would knock off one of the special energies to Giratina. Alright, we've got to finish this up. The other thing it does is that you can discard a stadium in play. So if your opponent has a stadium that they're really reliant on, this Iron Crusher will be useful. Now, one thing I should say is I think this can see play, and metal types have some advantages that they've got shield energy, and so you could really bulk him up and put stuff on him to keep him alive longer. And so that might be the advantage he has, is that you can hit for 120, and then put like shield energy and the new stadium in play, Reverse Valley, and you could reduce the damage by anywhere from 20 to 30 every single turn, which could be very, very effective, keeping him alive. And then that Iron Crusher could be very useful. One other thing to talk out about him is that you can stream these pretty easily if you just use Bronzong. So you could always Meta Link, and you'd only need one Bronzong to stream him. So you could Meta Links to him, attach for the turn, and you're ready to go. So if your previous one gets knocked out, it's no big deal because the next one could be ready real easy. And that's another advantage of having just a 2 energy attachment as opposed to some of these megas that have 4 energies needed. Excuse me, guys. I'm so sorry. We're almost done. Ferroseed and Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn here has Spike Whip. Does 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon times the number of colorless energy required in the retreat cost. Don't apply weakness and resistance for bench Pokemon. So this might also team up with Aegislash because, if you've got, let's say for instance, you got an opponent who's got Hoopa, and then he Hoopas and puts like 3 or 4 EXs down. And some of those, let's say, have a retreat cost of 2 or 3. You're going to hit everything on the bench for like 20 or 30, including whatever you hit the active for. So, and then come in with an Aegislash, and then, like, if you do that with this guy a couple times, and then come in with the Aegislash and double all the damage, you could see some knockouts even on EXs, and potentially you could even take 6 prizes in one turn. So that might be the partner to team up with the Aegislash right there. All right, Clefairy and Clefable. This is really sad because fairies really didn't get much help in this deck, and they really needed it. They needed it to help them get Gardevoir and Florges out, the stage 2s, but they really didn't get it. So they're stuck with Clefairy, which can sing and put somebody to sleep, and Clefable, which does Moon Barrier 30 damage and prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by Dragon-type Pokemon, which I don't know why that's such a big deal because Dragons are already weak to Fairies anyway, so I'm not really too worried about getting hit with a, Dragon. With Clefairy. Anyway, and then rolling attack for a fairy and a double colorless does 50 damage, and then a potential of 80. Not very good. Alright, Dragalge here. Dragalge has bad poison for a psychic energy. The defending Pokemon is now poisoned. Put 4 damage counters instead of 1 on that Pokemon in between turns. That's kind of cool because now it's like a Verbank City, but in Pokemon form. And Verbank only did 3 damage counters, now you're putting 4. We've kind of seen this before, though, with Toxicroak EX. I don't know how viable it'll be. I mean, it could be useful. It is only 1 energy for it to happen, and then you could Dragon Pulse does 60 damage and then discard the top card of your deck. So anyway, alright, moving right along, let's talk about Raticate and Raticate Break. Here's another break that seems pretty good, actually. When we first saw Raticate, it wasn't all that great. It's just 70 HP. Has an ability, Antibodies. This Pokemon can't be affected by any special conditions, so that means no poison, no confusion, no sleep, which is really good. and you'll see why it's important in just a moment. Dirty Shock does, for one colorless, your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, and discard any Pokemon tools attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Alright, and then that leads us right into Raticate Break. There was a Raticate in a few in the black and white era that did the same attack, Super Fang, but it required 3 colorless. Now with this break card, it only requires 2 colorless. Put damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon until its remaining HP is 10. That's pretty, I gotta say, that's pretty impressive right there. Because if they, let's say you're going against an EX, for a double colorless, you can use this. So let's say they have 180 HP. Now they're just left with 10 HP. So they're only doing 170. You did 170 damage to them. If you throw Gyarados into the mix, because he has the ability Antibodies, you can't be poisoned from Gyarados, even though you're not a grass type. Gyarados will poison your opponent, knocking them out, because that was the 10 HP they needed to that Raticate needed to finish the game. Now, one thing I should mention about this Raticate break, though, and that's what is kind of intriguing, is that it doesn't actually do any damage. So if you don't have a way to do the last 10 damage through poison, like Hypnotoxic Laser, in expanded format, or through the Gyarados, Raticate will never by himself be able to take a knockout. Which means you either need to team him up with something else, maybe like a Fortress, but that would have to be done on the opposite side of the attack, so they could heal up, or you could use Bats, which again would have to be done on the opposite side on your next turn, and so if they've healed up, that might not be all that great. Alright, so that's the Raticate break. Stantler here, I don't know if there's anything really big. It does an additional 50 damage to Mega Evolution Pokemon on your bench. Okay, this attack does 50 more damage if you have a Mega Evolution Pokemon on your bench. So it could potentially do 80 damage for a double colorless. Again, nothing super big. Okay, Ho-Oh-EX. Forgot about this. We got to mention him. 180 HP and has the ability Cleansing Flame. If there's a fire type Pokemon on him, he can heal 50 damage every turn. So that's actually kind of cool, because you can constantly be healing yourself every turn. Now this, with Smeargle in the format, this energy cost isn't as difficult as you think. For a grass, water, and a lightning type, lightning energy, we can do 130 damage, and then it also does 30 damage to the bench. So it's kind of like Darkrai, a little bit stronger version of Darkrai, where you're doing 130 damage to the active and 30 to the bench instead of 90 to the active and 30 to the bench. Darkrai's was 2 darkness and a colorless, so this is going to be a little tricky. Again, though, with Smeargle in the format, we can pretty easily change the energies on there, and we have energy acceleration coming up that we'll talk about, that could potentially get Ho-Oh attacking even as quickly as turn 1, potentially. Alright, I don't know that I'm going to talk about any more of these colorless types, but we're getting into the trainer cards now. So we are going to take a few minutes to talk about these. I think there's a lot of really good ones here. The first one being Time Puzzle. Alright, Time Puzzle is going to be definitely C play. I can tell you right now, you will C play. People are going to play test this card and figure out the best way to use it. Alright, it has 2 different possibilities that you can use it for. If you just play one of these cards, you can look at the top 3 cards of your deck and then put them back on the top of your deck in any order you like. Not super effective, but it could be useful in one way or another. At least you could kind of chain it with an Acrobike, so you can put the exact 2, like if, let's say you're playing Night March and you've got a Night Marcher and a DCE, and you want to make sure you grab the DCE and put the Night Marcher in the discard pile, you could use this to look at those top 3 cards and put them back exactly the way you want, and then use the Acrobike to get the card exactly the way you wanted it. So it will work. I think that combos well with Acrobike, specifically for that reason. Acrobike always been somewhat of a risk in the past, but this is actually going to reduce that risk if you play one of them. Now, if you play 2 of them, though, this is the combo that everybody's thinking is going to be really awesome. Play 2 of them together. Choose 2 cards from your discard pile and show them to your opponent and put them into your hand. So Enhanced Hammers really love to take out Special Energy. You're now going to be able to grab Special Energy back. Item cards that you normally wouldn't get to reuse, now you get to reuse them. Stadiums, now you don't have to run 4 stadiums. Maybe you get away with just running 3. Play these 2 cards and make sure that you get a stadium back into your hand. I think it's going to be useful. The only problem I kind of see is, since you have to play 2 of these together to be able to use that effect, and most people, I think, are going to play 4 of these if they're going to use these at all. The thing is if any gets prized, it may not be as easy to get 2 of them in your hand as you would think, to be able to use that effect. So anyway, that's Time Puzzle. Alright, moving right along, Max Elixir. Alright, Max Elixir I think is going to be really playable. I think you're going to see this as a 4 of in most decks. Look at the top 6 cards of your deck, and you may choose a basic energy card you find there and attach it to one of your benched basic Pokemon. So there's a lot of requirements for this to be usable. First of all, you have to have a basic benched Pokemon. So you can't, if it's evolved, you can't attach it to an evolved Pokemon. It has to be on the bench, so you can't attach it to the active. You're only going to be able to look at the top 6 cards of your deck. So, you may not even find that card, an energy. But I still think it's going to be worth playing, because 6 of them, because to be able to potentially get 4 extra energies out that much quicker, just that possible energy acceleration is going to be so awesome that I don't see why you wouldn't play this card, especially if you're playing just big basics. And that, remember, I told you big basics, I thought, got the biggest advantage from these decks, from this set. And here's another reason why, is because of Max Elixir. So, alright, Burst Balloon. This is a tool card. I kind of like this because with Echo Arm in the format, you can keep bringing these back. Key thing to remember is at the end of your opponent's turn, this card goes to the discard pile. So you only really have 1 turn to use it. But it says when the Pokemon this card is attached to is damaged by an opponent's Pokemon's attack, put 6 damage counters back onto that attacking Pokemon. So it's kind of like a Rock Guard. Rock Guard was an A-Spec card that is still played in Expanded, but it's like a temporary Rock Guards. But you can play 4 of these, whereas the Rock Guard in Expanded you can only have 1 of in your deck. So this, you can play 4 of them, and then you can Echo Arm them back into your deck. So what this is going to do is this is going to force your opponent to either have to choose to attack you and take the damage of 60 back to them, or they're going to have to choose not to attack you and wait till the Burst Balloon goes out. But again, if you Echo Arm, you have some Echo Arms in the deck, you could literally play 8 to 10 of these Burst Balloons, so it would force them to have to attack into you or Lysander around them. And I think that's kind of cool. I think there's going to be decks that are just based around this that will have that extra damage in play. Matter of fact, you might even see this in that Raticate break deck. I never thought about that. But you use the 10 damage, use the attack to bring them down to 10 damage, but before you do, put a burst balloon on them, and they have to decide: am I going to hit this Raticate break and knock it out, but at the same time I'm going to get knocked out? That could be a very well good play with Raticate break. Fighting Spirit Belt. This is another one that I just really love that you're going to see with big basics. It's just going to be a really great card. And Muscle Band is going to rotate, and we don't know if they're going to reprint it. But next year, which will not be till next September, so we still got like 9 months. But when it does rotate, if they haven't reprinted it, this is probably going to take the place of Muscle Band, and it may take the place of Muscle Band anyway. It's just so good, okay? Now you can attach it to any Pokemon, but the effects only are usable if it's attached to a basic Pokemon. So again, think big basics, think Seismitoad, think Lucario, think Manectric, think Sceptile, okay? The basic Pokemon this card is attached to gets its max HP increased by 40. So now Seismitoad is 220 HP, Sceptile is 210 HP, Giratina is 210 HP, and its attacks do 10 more damage. So now you're getting half of a Muscle Band, but you're getting 40 more HP. So now you're hitting for like 220. I mean, you have 220 HP, which is just as much as a Mega would have. That's just, to me, is crazy. I mean, they just make Seismitoad even more and more strong. Crazy. I don't know why. Alright, Spirit Links. We just got the 2 Megas in this set, so Gyarados gets a Spirit Link and Scizor gets a Spirit Link. Alright, let's look at the 2 supporter cards in this set. Neither of these is like really, really outstanding, but they are still going to see some play. Delinquent, I think, is going to see more play than the other one. This is the one I was telling you about, that you have to discard a stadium card and play. And if you do, your opponent chooses 3 cards from his or her hand and discards them. Alright, so remember we talked about that Shiftry, that when you flip a coin, you flip a coin, 3 coins, and then look at your opponent's hand, and for every head you flip, discard a card from their hand. Alright, well, if you discard a bunch of their cards with using Delinquent, and then you use that attack, you can potentially knock them down to no cards where they're just in full top deck mode. One combo that I see with this, on turn 1, potentially, you could play the Stadium card, use the effect from the Stadium if you need it, then play Delinquent, discard your own Stadium card, but before you do that, red card your opponent so they're down to 4 cards, then use Delinquent and get rid of 3 more of them so they only have 1 card in their hand. Now the thing is, they're going to have the 1 card that they want of those 4, but if they don't have something to draw themselves out of it, they could be in big, big trouble. Psychic Mind Reading, that's the other supporter card here. Again, I don't think it's anything special. You do get to look at their hand, at your opponent's hand, and then you get to discard as many of the cards from your hand as you like, and then draw that many cards in return. I don't know. I mean, if I'm going to discard, it is kind of good in a way, because if you have, instead of sycamoring a bunch of stuff away like you normally would, you could just discard the cards you want to discard and then keep the rest. So you might have 7 cards in your hand, and you play this card, look at your opponent's hand, and then let's say you want to discard 4 of them and then draw 4, and you still have a hand of 7. The only problem I see with this is if you play your hand down real low and this is your only supporter in your hand. I mean, if you have 2 cards in your hand, this one and one other, you're only going to have the option of discarding 1 card from your hand. So I don't know if Psychic's Mind Reading is going to get a lot of play. Again, it is something, though, that I will play test and see if it has any potential. Reverse Valley, I've alluded to this Stadium already. The blue side, choose which way this card faces, and if you plays the blue side toward you, then your metal Pokemon take 10 less damage from your opponent's attack. If you play the red side towards you, then your dark Pokemon do 10 more damage to his or her opponent's active. I really think that this could be a very useful deck in both a useful stadium in both dark decks and metal decks. But especially dark decks. I feel like dark decks are really going to get a boost from this. Zoroark now, if your opponent has a bench of 5 Pokemon, Zoroark gets a bonus of 10 damage, so now it can Mind Jack for 170, which is that magic number to hit EXs, and that's without a muscle band. Yveltal-EX, that extra 10 will just give it a boost to hit that 170 mark easier also. Darkrai-EX, the one we just looked at in this set, also will get a boost. So I think that's going to be useful for especially dark Pokemon. Metal Pokemon, it's going to be kind of interesting to see if Metal tries to play more of a defensive style, where they try to just absorb the damage so that they don't get hit as hard. Maybe using hard charms, assault vests, and throwing in also shield energies. Might be an interesting for metal types. But I guess that kind of remains to be seen. But we will definitely see how that works out. Splash Energy. We've been waiting for this energy for some time. This is the water type Pokemon special energy. And it's not spectacular, but it's also, I think, going to be usable. If the water Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, then you get to return the Pokemon cards to the owner's hand. So you can then reuse your Pokemon over and over again, which could be very useful. Especially if you got something like a Greninja break or something, and it gets knocked out, you just put it right. You can put it back down. I mean, you're gonna have to evolve it over time, but could be useful in that way. All right, we're gonna look at some. I'm just gonna quickly go because we've already talked about the EXs in the set. But here's the Gyarados full art. Here's the Mega Gyarados full art. I know you guys like to look at these. Here's the Manaphy full art. That's kind of cute. The Espeon full art. There's the Darkrai full art. The Scizor full art, or Scizor. The Mega Scizor full art. Pretty good. There's the Ho-Oh. And then the secret rare is another Gyarados shiny. So there you have it, guys. That is the set. I know it's long, hour and a half, but I like to be thorough and I like to, really talk deeply about the cards. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hit like if you made it all the way through. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe and feel free to comment below. Please tell me what your favorite card out of this set is. Anyway, until next time, this is PokeDad signing off. We'll talk to you later. Bye.